What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. If this isn't a welcome back, that's perfectly fine. Let me introduce myself. My name's Chris. I know how to read, allegedly. And today we're going to be doing some alleged reading because there are two books on my physical TBR that I have been dying to read since I've gotten them, since I've even heard about them, and we're finally going to get that done today. First and foremost, we have Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. I have only heard good things about this book. In a Brave New World video from not too long ago, I read Crime and Punishment, and I'm very interested to see both the differences and the similarities in Dostoevsky's writing from Crime and Punishment to this book. This is actually going to be the second book that we read in today's video. The first book that we're going to read in this video, and actually the book that I've already started reading, is Smoke Kings by Jamal Mayfield. But on the back here, it says a propulsive noir thriller with an unforgettable cast of characters that asks what would happen if reparations for African Americans were finally charged and exacted now by force. Now, I'm currently 52 pages into this book, and this is a 390-page book, so I definitely still have a lot more to go. So from his personal website, I think this might be a debut novel, which is crazy because in these first 52 pages, I think the initial idea that I get about Mayfield's writing is that this man can write tension probably better than any other book I've read. And maybe it's because the characters that we've been introduced to so far are dealing with these very real, very raw emotions that a lot of people in modern day and even past America are feeling when it comes to the unnecessary and senseless killings of African Americans. And we've already been introduced to a few characters that I can tell are going to have really cool story arcs as we progress further on. Looking at where I am now in this book, we do have a lot of work to do in order to get some actual story and some actual stuff being built. So I will try and get some of this reading done tonight, and then we'll kind of have a wrap up tomorrow morning. I think that's the plan right now. On Jamal Mayfield's website, it also says that this book is based on a very popular video, or a viral video, by a woman named Kimberly Jones called How Can We Win? Now, I haven't seen that video before, and I haven't even heard of it, so I kind of want to watch that and then get back to reading, just so I can have a mental understanding of where Jamal Mayfield was when he was writing this book, or the inspiration that led to writing this book. So we're going to make our way through this, and then later on in the video we are going to get to The Brothers Karamazov, which I'm very excited to get to both of these. So let's get this video started. That's fucking wicked. That's crazy. Holy shit. It's fucking wicked. I realize that I probably shouldn't record when Dennis Scott over there, my 3D printer's going crazy, but we're gonna have to move past that. I read a little bit before I went to sleep last night. We are now on chapter 11, page 82. And I realized that I haven't really done a summary of everything that's been going on yet. So let's do that. So while I've talked about kind of the cast of characters that we're following so far, there is one kind of main protagonist, and his name is Nate Evers. Now, in the first chapter of this book, we are following Nate as he's going to this hospital very early in the morning, finding out that his cousin Darius got murdered by this racist white gang that was following him around. So from this point, the book ends up following a two-timeline structure. One of the timelines is the past. It is the day leading up to Darius's murder, and you are following Darius kind of knowing what the ending of his life will be, and you're kind of getting the past. I think it's 24 hours or 12 hours if I'm not mistaken, but you're getting the past that leads up to his eventual murder. And then it is the current day timeline, and in this timeline you are following Nate as well as a couple of his family members and his friends who have become sort of this Avenger retribution force. During the day, Nate and his friends are part of this grassroots committee that is looking to benefit the lives of Black Americans and minority Americans from a political perspective, or from a political standpoint. But behind the scenes, Nate and this group of friends and family are essentially enacting their own version of vigilante reparations, where they are going after people that have committed hate crimes against Black Americans. And in this part of the book that I'm in currently, they just had their first big argument within the group on whether they should just stick to white people committing racist acts against Black people, or whether they should enact this style of revenge or avenging from other people, no matter their skin color, just people that have committed racist acts. Now, at this point in the story, we have also been introduced to this character named Mason. Now, on the back, on the blurb here, it says that he is the leader of a white supremacist group. we didn't know that, or at least we don't know that up until the point that I am in the story. So that's a little bit of a spoiler on the blurb for me. But this guy Mason, like immediately after being introduced, you know, is a racist dude. And he is like in some private detective firm. Like he used to be a cop and now he's doing more like private investigation sort of thing. Very early on in the story, one of the targets that Nate and his group of people go after is a friend of Mason's, right? Who ends up telling Mason, hey, I just got kidnapped. They showed a noose to me. Like they were threatening me for money. They were trying to get reparations. And Mason's like, all right, let's see what I could do. So now not only do we have this tense situation of the day leading up to Darius's death, but we also have this tense situation of having these group of people who want this revenge for Black Americans and just for racism in general. They want their get back. We also have this racist white supremacist dude who is just at this point in the story very like at the very inkling of being on their tail. I can definitely see like the framework of a really intense story being built, and I'm loving Mayfield's writing so far. Another thing I will say is this book has 71 chapters in it, and I am on page 82 and I'm already on chapter 11. So each one is really only like a few pages long. So it feels like you're getting a lot of a story, like you're following a lot of these scenes back to back. We do have like the multiple timelines, and we've been introduced to probably like 10 or 15 characters at this point. So in my head, like it's starting to get a little tough to kind of like balance everything that's going on, but it is the beginning of the story. So I know that all of this stuff is gonna like converge at some point to where it's gonna be a little bit easier to follow. But I am really enjoying this book so far. And I do want to mention before I forget, last night I did watch the Kimberly Jones video that this book is based on. And I noticed also that in the beginning of the physical copy, there is actually a quote from the video that says, and they are lucky that what Black people are looking for is equality and not revenge. If y'all haven't seen that video, even if you're not going to read this book, I highly recommend just watching that video. I'll put a link to it in the description down below next to the like and subscribe button if y'all are enjoying what's going on in this video so far. But watching that video and then reading more about Nate Evers and trying to understand where he's coming from, both wanting to kind of produce change from a political and a government perspective, and also like with his own hands from the dirt vigilante perspective, like I completely get where he's coming from. I want to hit the halfway point in this book before we kind of catch up again, if there's anything to catch up on. And I think that's about 120-ish pages. So I will try to get most of that reading done today. If not, I'll check in with y'all tomorrow morning. But so far, I'm really enjoying this. Hello. It is the next morning. And while I didn't get a great night's sleep, I did finally get to pass the halfway point of Smoke Kings. And a lot has happened in like the 120 pages that I read. Let's start with the negative, because there are some negatives about this book. Like I said, there is a big cast of characters, and all of these chapters, these little scenes that are playing out, because there is such a big cast of characters and because we're switching perspectives pretty much every chapter between these cast of characters, it can get a little confusing because you're switching POVs very often. Racist detective is just a racist detective. The person that they're talking about on the back, on the blurb on the back here, the leader of the white supremacist group who is hot on their tail, we get introduced to him. Terrible dude. So while Nate Evers and Joshua and Isaiah and Rachel, this group of people that are trying to avenge Darius's death, are going after this one guy who tore down this statue that was meant to commemorate this young child who was killed by some racist white people, that doesn't go too well, and they make a lot of mistakes, and they were very messy throughout the whole process. So now not only do they have racist detective coming after them, they also have racist supremacist leader going after them as well. I don't remember if I mentioned this yesterday, but we have Nate Evers, who's kind of one of the protagonists in this story, but we also have Isaiah, also known as IT, and while Nate Evers is a Black man, Isaiah is a Korean man who was adopted by a white family, who was like inducted into the friend group. And a lot of the infighting in the group that we talked about yesterday is based on Nate and Isaiah's interactions of Nate being a Black man wanting to go after racist white people, and Isaiah, who is not Black but still a minority, wanting to go after just anyone who's being racist. So that has come to a head kind of in this first half of the book, or at least the part that we are in the book. And and the last kind of mission against this one guy named Chipper that did not go very well is also beginning to kind of sprout a bunch of problems. So I'm very excited to see where this book goes. I think it's been like 2 days since I started reading this, and I'm already halfway through, but I should be able to either put in a pretty massive dent today or finish the book today if I'm feeling really studious. I will also say pretty soon after we did the last wrap up, we kind of saw the last hour or two that led to Darius's murder. You saw this little boy just get beat up and get hurt, and it was like a really tense read, and it was really hard to get through, but I think it really kind of emphasized Nate and his emotions, and Joshua, who's Nate's brothers. Joshua's also in the group. You really get like their anger and their pain, and while you might not agree with everything that the group is doing or everything that the group has done, you can understand where they're coming from, because they don't even have all of the information that we as readers have on what happened to Darius on that day. But that kind of specific chapter, I forget what chapter it was, it doesn't have an exact chapter, but February 19th, 2017 at 6:36 p.m. Tough part of the book, tough part to read. But we still have like 49% of this book to go, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of like revenge commentary and social commentary and talk about race and retribution and stuff like that. So I'm very excited to get to the second half of this. I will check in with y'all, I think, when we finish this book, because I'm probably gonna make my way through this pretty quickly. I'll catch y'all then.
Many hours later.
All right, y'all. So wow, I did not expect to be filming this update so early, because I did blast my way through the ending of Smoke Kings by Jamal Mayfield, and I'm gonna say immediately off the rip, not a 5-star read, but I did very much enjoy it though. I think the conversations that Mayfield was able to have on race, on retribution, on revenge, on just the tension in this book is something I noted immediately that still maintains throughout the entirety from page 1 to page 398. There's a lot of really good things here, but I think the problems that I had with this book are the stuff that I talked about earlier. I was worried that going back and forth between the past and the present timeline would get kind of annoying, but it didn't even happen that often, so I thought that was going to be a problem, but it really wasn't. I think as cool and as wide-ranging and as developed as all of the characters in this book that we were introduced to were, there were a lot of characters, and there were a lot of important characters. And I felt like what would happen a lot is you would get a really cool like 12-page chapter on one character, and then we'd switch point of views, get a 4-page chapter on another character, then switch point of views and get a 6-page chapter on another character. And while that led, I think, to like overall good world building and good character building, instead of having like 1 or 2 standout characters, it led to having a whole bunch of like 6 out of 10s, you know? Which obviously isn't a bad thing, but there were a lot of characters in this book that I wanted to learn more about. I don't think the ending was bad. I think the end of the story was pretty good. A lot of stuff kind of culminated. It was a bunch of stuff happening at once with all of these characters, and it all came together, I think, in a satisfying way. And although it isn't said like explicitly, there are 1 or 2 chapters towards the end of the book that are essentially like epilogues for some of these characters. And the reason I say some of these characters is because a lot of stuff in those last 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3 chapters, it's kind of just, we don't really know what happens. And it's not even that I need everything explained to me at the end of a book. Like, I love leaving some stuff up to mystery or chance or whatever, but it felt like you had so many characters with so many plot lines and subplots and stuff that was brought up. Obviously, towards the end of a book, like, you can't answer every question. You can't answer or solve every plot line. But there were so many that the plot lines that were answered didn't make up for all of the plot lines that weren't answered. Overall, I think I'm going to give Smoke Kings by Jamal Mayfield 4 stars. I had my issues with the ending. I think some of the progression of the story and some of the pacing of it could have been done a little bit better. But the messaging and the way that Mayfield is able to write tension and stress and anger and revenge and rage, I think is so well done that I think this definitely deserves a read. Smoke King joins its place along She Who Became the Sun and Stephen King's The Shining on the bookshelf. And with that, we move on to the second half of this video. Very important, probably the most important second half to a video I've ever had, where I will be reading The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I don't know if I'm gonna get started on this today, but one thing I will have on hand, one of these. I intend to highlight and underline the hell out of this book. I just don't know if I will have enough time to read this today, but I'm very excited. This is a tentative let's go because I don't know when we are going to get to the Brothers Karamazov, but we're going to get to it at some point in the future. Let's go. Alright y'all, quick little update here. I am now on the beginning of book 2, An Inappropriate Gathering, chapter 1, They Arrive at the Monastery. And the reason I'm checking in with y'all so early is because I am realizing that it took me a little less than 2 hours, maybe around an hour and a half, to read 33 pages. Which is crazy. And this is a very dense book, don't get me wrong, but I'm definitely not going to finish this book anywhere near as quickly as I finished Smoke Kings. Not a ton has happened, but I think these like 36 or so pages have done a lot to kind of set up who our characters are and what they believe in. First and foremost, we have the paternal figure of the group, Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov. Quite possibly the best example of the worst, most absentee father you've ever thought of. Just the definition of debaucherous and a drunkard who has 3 children with 2 different wives. His first son with his first wife, Dmitri, is the only son of the 3 who grew up with this conviction that no matter what happened when he became of age, he would get something from his father, whether his father wanted to give it to him or not. He spent a disorderly adolescence and youth. He never finished high school. He went to military school for some reason. And his father actually noticed that Dmitri had a false and inflated idea of his property. Even though he's a terrible person, this father, Fyodor, he had money. And Dmitri seems like the kind of guy who's like, I don't know how much money my dad has, but I'm gonna get my share. I'm gonna get my piece. Next up, we have 2 sons from the second marriage born 4 years apart, the first one being Ivan. However, of the elder Ivan, I will only say that as he was growing up, he was somehow gloomy and withdrawn, far from timid, but as if he had already perceived by the age of 10 that they were indeed living in someone else's family. A bar, because obviously he didn't care about his first son. Fyodor's not gonna care about his other 2 kids. They eventually get taken by his mother-in-law and raised under her care and the care of some people that she also trusted. And Ivan seems like a centrist of a person. Like one of the things I noticed with the introduction of these characters is it's like a scale in personality. So you have Fyodor Petrovich, who's like the worst of everything, right? A terrible father, a terrible person. He has money but spends it on women and booze. You go down, you have Dmitri, who's definitely not at that level, but can still be kind of hard-headed, kind of strong-willed. Another level down, you have Ivan, who's maybe a little more withdrawn than the other 2, but still very smart, very intelligent, and definitely has like a strong point of view when it comes to what he believes in. And then we have the third son, Alyosha, who at the beginning of this book, in the author's note, the author kind of says, hey, I think Alyosha is the hero of this story. And we learn very quickly that Alyosha, cool dude. Rad guy. I highlighted a bunch of stuff in this chapter. The author says, I will give my full opinion beforehand. Alyosha was simply an early lover of mankind. Everyone loved this young man wherever he appeared. We get a range of these characters, right? And we get an understanding of one side of being like bad and evil to the absolute brightness and lightness that is Alyosha, and you have the 2 other sons in between. Like, I'm very interested to see kind of how this range of characters and personalities get to what is essentially the heart of this book. Even though they were separated for a majority of their lives, the brothers come together with the father, and they are eventually going to have a meeting in this monastery in the next chapter, because Dmitri is saying that their father is essentially holding back on them, right? That even though he hasn't been a part of their life, either now while he's living or after he passes away, the sons should get some form of inheritance, some sort of property from their father. So they're getting together, they're having this meeting, the three of them and the father, in this monastery that Alyosha is a part of, in order to have like some sort of neutral ground. So from the blurb we read on the back, we know that this book is a murder mystery. And I don't think this is a spoiler. The book has been out for like 150 years, but we know that Fyodor, the paternal figure, dies. He is murdered. And that's where the murder mystery comes from, because of course his three sons who have gotten together to talk with him, especially about like money and inheritances and stuff like that, are going to be prime suspects. So I'm very interested to see like how these three sons and their personalities and their worldviews and their ideals kind of come together, especially after their father passes away. But I truly don't know how long it's going to take me to read all this, because this book is 776 pages, and including the author's note and the introduction by one of the translators, plus what I've read, this has taken me maybe 2 hours to read 50 pages, which is kind of nuts. I think I'll check in with y'all around the 200, maybe 250 page mark, so we could have a decent chunk of the story kind of already read. This is about, what, 200 pages? Look, that looks far less than I thought. What? I get that it's 25%, 200 pages, but that's crazy. But I'm really enjoying this book so far. The character work has been really, really good. I know there's something being set up, and I can't wait for it. I'm already enjoying this a little bit more than I enjoyed the beginning of Crime and Punishment, but we'll see what the rest of this very floppy book has to offer. I'll catch up with y'all soon.
1 million, zillion, jillion, dillion, cotillion times later.
All right, y'all. I got not so great news. So I gave myself this many days. I gave myself 8 days to finish The Brothers Karamazov, which I don't know if I've said this already in the video, is 777 pages. A little bit less than 100 pages a day, which is still a lot, but I thought it would be doable. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and I have not been able to finish The Brothers Karamazov in time to release this video. And I know what you're thinking. How far into the book did you get? Well, over the past 8 days, I've been trying to read it as much as I can, and I even signed up for Kindle Unlimited. What even is that? A library card you have to pay for? And over the last 8 days, I have gotten to page 192. 192 out of 777 pages. I'm pissed. And maybe it's because it's been a minute since I read Crime and Punishment, and I kind of forgot a lot about Dostoevsky's like writing style or prose, if that makes sense. And while I remembered that a lot of these characters and a lot of the dialogue between these characters are conversations, are them talking to each other, I kind of underestimated just how much of this book is that. They don't just talk, they monologue, they tell stories, they ramble, they rant. And you want to maybe glaze over some of the stuff they're talking about, but then you realize, hey, this is incredibly important to who this character is as a person, and also me as a reader. I'm really enjoying this like rambly, ADHD filled conversation, so I want to read it over and over again. There's a scene early on where Father Zosima, who is the elder of the monastery that everybody's meeting up at, decides to take a break from talking with the Karamazovs and all of their guests, and instead decides to talk to all of the people that have come to this monastery in order to ask for help from Father Zosima and from the Lord. And I don't know what it was about that scene, but I really enjoyed it. I think I should have prefaced this whole Brothers Karamazov section by saying I'm not an incredibly religious person. I grew up religious. I'm definitely not that anymore now, but I was really interested in like the conversations on religion, on God, on morality that have like permeated everything I have heard about this book. But there's another scene later on where you have Fyodor Pavlovich, you have Ivan, Alyosha's there, and then the servant of Fyodor Pavlovich, I forget his name. Again, we love a character list. We have Grigory is the servant's name, and then we have Grigory's adopted son, who is Smerdyakov. All of these characters are surrounding a dining room table, and they're having this really interesting conversation on if a character, or if someone, I should say, who is of the Christian faith was captured by soldiers, by mercenaries of a different religion, of a different faith, and that different faith wanted them to renounce their Christianity in order for them to be set free, in order for them to live. Are they still children of God? Are they still Christian if they choose to renounce their religion in order to live? And I reread that conversation probably 3 or 4 times because I didn't know, and I still don't know, what side of that argument I'm on. And I think one of the best things that Dostoevsky does in the few conversations, because again, I'm not even 200 pages into this book, one of the best things Dostoevsky does in these very religious and very difficult conversations that he's having on religion and on morality and on Christianity is present both sides in a very good way. And I think what I was talking about in probably the last clip that y'all saw, with having these characters that are kind of like a range of personalities from like absolutely terrible, horrible to absolutely pristine and pure. Having these characters have these really difficult conversations is really interesting because you get literally a scale of responses, and you personally as the reader can attach yourself to who you deem fit or who you agree with the most. And I think in complete contrast to how I was able to read Smoke Kings, I don't think you can really read this book like you would read a lot of other books. I think you like toil with this book. I think you wrestle with this book. And if I'm wrestling with the Brothers Karamazov, I got my ass knocked out. So while the point of this video was to read 2 5-star predictions, I am only going to be able to read one of them, at least in this video. And part of me was debating on whether I should even release this and just scrap it, or whether I should just take longer to release this video. But as we enter year 2 of Chris Reads, I really want to make sure that I'm open and honest with you guys. And I think if reading was the only thing I had to worry about, if I was a full-time reader, book, YouTuber, whatever you want to call it, I would have gotten this done probably in 3 or 4 days, if that, right? I'm still just a regular guy. And a lot of y'all watching this are regular people too. So I wanted to kind of show that even when you try, sometimes when you put your entire heart, soul, and effort into reading a book, you only get 200 pages out of 777 pages. And I think also at the end of the day, this book deserves time. It deserves your attention. It deserves your concentration. And I think the best thing this book did, or at least me reading this book did, was make sure that I had everything shut off. Like, I tried listening to music, you'll see in some of the clips. I tried to listen to music while I was reading this, and it just didn't work out. I was just sitting there, whether it was with the physical book and a pen or with the Kindle ready to highlight stuff. Like, I really wanted to read what was being written, as dumb as that sounds. I really wanted to take in everything Dostoevsky was writing, and because of that, I wasn't able to finish this book when I wanted to finish this book. I will be reading it in my free time, however, or at least when I'm not filming or reading something for videos. If you want to see like my full outlook on this book, you can follow me on Instagram right here at chrisreads_YT. I'll probably do a post or a story about it once I'm actually finished reading this book. And I will say, so far, this is a 5-star predictions video. 200 pages into this is still 5 stars. I'm already enjoying this book very, very much. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, all that good business. Specifically, if you want to comment, let me know if there's a book that you set a goal for and you weren't able to reach it. I gave myself 8 days to read 177 pages, and I didn't even reach a third of that. So let me know if there's a book that ever made you admit defeat, admit surrender, wave the white flag, because I'd love to know. Misery loves company, help a brother out. Shout out Dostoevsky with Brothers Karamazov. He does not need it. One of the greatest authors ever. I've enjoyed the 2 books of his that I have read so far, or like the 1.25 books of his that I've read so far. And then shout out Jamal Mayfield, first-time author with this novel right here, Smoke Kings, and I very much enjoyed that. Do something that makes you happy, do something that makes you some money, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.